Before we get into this, if you're into real stories from tribal law enforcement, the cases that don't make it into official reports, the things we find on reservation lands that can't be explained by federal manuals, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like if you want more stories from Indian country. And I'm curious, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Comment below. Now, what I'm about to tell you happened in the winter of 1989 in the Snowbird Mountains of North Carolina, on Cherokee tribal lands. It's the reason our department has protocols that officially don't exist, and it's the reason I drive up to those mountains alone every winter, even though I retired 15 years ago. Let's get into it. My name is Samuel Swimmer, and in 1989 I was a Cherokee Nation Marshal working for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians on the Qualla Boundary Reservation in North Carolina. For those who don't know, tribal law enforcement is complicated. We handle most crimes on reservation land, but certain cases fall under federal jurisdiction. Murders, major felonies, anything involving non-tribal members. Those go to the FBI. It's a jurisdictional mess that makes every cop show you've ever watched look simple. I'd been with the Marshal Service for 18 years by then. Seen my share of domestic disputes, drunk and disorderlies. The occasional drug bust standard small-town law enforcement. Except our small town happened to be sovereign Cherokee territory surrounded by the Great Smoky Mountains beautiful country. Dangerous country. The kind of place where nature doesn't care about your badge or your gun. It was December 3rd, 1989, when everything started cold morning, first heavy snow of the season. I was in the office doing paperwork, every cop's favorite activity when dispatch called. Samuel, we've got a missing person report. Hunter didn't come back from Snowbird area yesterday. Wife's worried. Snowbird Mountains. I felt something tighten in my chest. Though I couldn't have told you why at the time. Who's missing? I asked. Robert Wilnody, 46, tribal member. Went hunting yesterday morning near Old Mission Creek. Was supposed to be back by dark, never showed. Old Mission Creek. That name meant something to me, something from childhood warnings and elder stories I'd half forgotten. My grandmother used to say we didn't go up there after the first snow. Never explained why. Just said it was one of those rules you followed if you wanted to keep living. I'll head up there, I said. Get search and rescue on standby. My partner, Tom Sequoia, looked up from his own paperwork. Tom was younger, 28, full of that energy that makes young cops think they're invincible. Good officer, though. Listened more than he talked. Want company? He asked. Yeah, grab the winter gear. It's going to be cold up there. We took one of the department trucks, four-wheel drive with chains on the tires. The road up to Snowbird area was more suggestion than pavement, winding through dense forest that got thicker and darker the higher we climbed. Snow was coming down steady, those big fat flakes that stick to everything. You ever been up here before? Tom asked as we drove. Once or twice, long time ago, not since I was a kid. My grandfather used to tell stories about these mountains, Tom said. Said there were places where the old world still existed. Places where the treaties and reservations didn't matter, because something older than the United States government was in charge. Your grandfather tell a lot of stories? Enough that I learned to listen. Tom looked out the window at the snow-covered trees. He ever tell you about Nunna'yi? The Stone Man. Cherokee legend, one of the old ones. A giant made of living rock that protected the people in ancient times. My grandmother had mentioned it once or twice, usually in the context of warnings about going places we shouldn't go. Heard the name, I said. Can't say I remember the whole story. My grandfather said Nunna'yi was a protector. But like all protectors, he could be dangerous if you disrespected his territory. Said there were places in these mountains where Nunna'yi still walked, and you didn't want to be there when he did. I would have laughed it off if we were anywhere else. But up here, with the snow falling and the trees pressing in on both sides of the narrow road, legends didn't seem quite so ridiculous. We found Robert Wilnody's truck parked at the trailhead. Exactly where his wife said it would be, snow had covered it, but not completely. We could still see the outline, still read the license plate. I called it in while Tom checked the cab. "Keys in the ignition," Tom reported. "Wallet on the dash. Hunting rifle's gone, but his coat's still here." That was wrong. Nobody went hunting in December without a coat, not in these mountains. The temperature was already in the low 20s and dropping. "Tracks?" I asked. Tom pointed to a set of footprints leading away from the truck, already half filled with fresh snow. Heading toward Old Mission Creek Trail. We followed them. The trail wound through old-growth forest, massive hemlocks and oaks that had been here since before the Trail of Tears. This was deep Cherokee country, the kind of place our ancestors had hidden when federal soldiers came to force the removal in 1838. Some of my people had escaped, lived in these mountains while the rest were marched to Oklahoma. The Eastern Band existed because of places like this, remote, defensible, sacred. The footprints led us about a mile in before they just stopped. Not like Robert had turned around. Not like he'd been picked up by someone. They just ended in the middle of the trail, mid-stride, like he'd been plucked off the ground. "What the hell?" Tom muttered, crouching down to examine the last print. I scanned the area. No signs of struggle. No blood. No drag marks. The snow around the final footprint was undisturbed except for the print itself. Could he have backtracked, stepped in his own prints? I suggested. Tom shook his head. Snow would show disturbance, and look, the depth is consistent. He was walking forward when the prints stopped. I radioed for search and rescue, but I knew what they'd find. Nothing. People didn't just vanish mid-step. But the evidence said Robert Wilnody had done exactly that. Back at the office, I did what any good cop does when faced with something that doesn't make sense. I looked for patterns, pulled the files on missing persons in the Snowbird area for the past 40 years. What I found made my blood run cold. 1949, December 8th, 3 hunters vanished near Old Mission Creek, never found. 1959, December 12th, 2 hikers, college students from Chapel Hill, disappear in Snowbird area. Never found. 1969, December 5th, 4 campers vanish. Their campsite found intact, no signs of struggle. Never found. 1979, December 9th, park ranger. Investigating previous disappearances goes missing. Never found. 1989, December 3rd, Robert Wilnody vanishes, and we were now 3 days into December. Every 10 years. Always December. Always the first heavy snow. Always Old Mission Creek Valley. I spread the files across my desk, staring at the pattern. 14 people over 40 years, all gone without a trace. And officially, 14 separate incidents, unconnected. Closed as lost in wilderness or presumed dead from exposure. Tom came in with coffee, saw the files and went pale. That's a pattern. 10-year cycle, I said. Like clockwork. And we just started a new cycle 3 days ago. Why isn't this in our briefings? Why doesn't anyone talk about this? Good question. I pulled the oldest file, the one from 1949. Clipped to it was a memo, yellowed with age, stamped restricted, tribal council only. Snowbird incidents. All personnel are advised that investigations in the Old Mission Creek Valley are to be conducted only with explicit authorization from Tribal Council historical and cultural sensitivities require discretion. Federal authorities are not to be involved without council approval. This area is subject to traditional prohibitions. Officers are reminded to respect tribal elders' guidance regarding patrol boundaries. Translation: stay out, don't ask questions. Let it be, we need to talk to the elders, I said. Tom nodded. My grandfather might talk to us. He knows the old stories. Tom's grandfather, William Sequoia, lived in a small house on the edge of the reservation, surrounded by woods. He was 93 years old, sharp as a knife, and looked at me with eyes that had seen more than I ever would. "You're asking about Snowbird," he said before we even explained why we were there. "Someone went missing." "How did you?" "Snow fell heavy 3 days ago. First big snow of winter. I knew someone would disappear. Happens every 10 years, regular as seasons." He gestured for us to sit. "You're Cherokee Samuel Swimmer. Your grandmother was Clara Swimmer, yes?" "Yes, sir." "Clara knew, tried to warn people. Nobody listens anymore." He poured tea with hands that barely shook. "You want to know about Nunna'yi." It wasn't a question. "Sir, I'm investigating missing persons. 14 people over 40 years. 17, he corrected. "You're missing 3 from before records were good. 1939, 1929, 1918. Probably more before that, but tribal records burned in a fire in 1910, so who knows? Could go back to the beginning." "The beginning of what?" Tom asked. William sipped his tea. "The beginning of the curse. 1838. Year of the removal. Year of the Trail of Tears." I knew the history. Every Cherokee did the forced march to Oklahoma. Thousands dead. Families destroyed. The worst act of genocide against our people. But what did that have to do with disappearances in 1989? "There was a village," William continued. "Small one, maybe 50 people. Up in Old Mission Creek Valley. When the soldiers came to round people up, that village refused to go. They hid in the mountains, thought they could wait it out. Some did survive the removal that way," I said. "That's why the Eastern Band exists. This village didn't survive." William's voice was flat. "December 1838. Soldiers found them. Would have dragged them to the stockade, sent them west. But the village had a medicine man. Powerful one name was Standing Deer. He performed a ritual, called on Nunna'yi to protect them." "The Stone Man," Tom said. "Yes. Nunna'yi came. Protected the village from the soldiers, but protection has a cost. Standing Deer didn't understand that. Or maybe he did and didn't care. The village was saved from the soldiers. But Nunna'yi's protection doesn't end. It never ends." "What do you mean?" I asked. William looked at me with those ancient eyes. "The village is still there, Samuel, still protected, still hidden. But it's frozen, caught in time. The people didn't die, but they didn't live either. They've been there for 151 years, trapped in stone, waiting." "That's not possible," I said, but the words felt hollow. "Every 10 years during the first heavy snow, the protection weakens. The village becomes visible again, and those trapped inside, they hunger for company, for life, for release. They don't mean to harm people. They just want someone to stay with them, to share their curse." "The missing people," Tom whispered. "They're in the village." "Turned to stone," William confirmed. "Aware, but unable to move, unable to speak, unable to die. Just like the original villagers, Nunna'yi doesn't distinguish between who he's protecting and who he's taking. Anyone in that valley, when the protection weakens, becomes part of it." I wanted to dismiss it as legend, as impossible. But I'd seen Robert Wilnody's footprints stop mid-stride. I'd seen the pattern. 40 years of perfect 10-year cycles. I'd seen the official warnings to stay out of that area, warnings that had no official explanation. "How do we stop it?" I asked. William shook his head. "You don't. You wait until the window closes, usually 7 days after first snow, and you stay away. The village fades back into protection, takes its new victims with it, and you don't go near that valley until the cycle starts again in 10 years. "That's not acceptable," I said. "Robert Wilnody is out there. Maybe still alive. I'm not leaving him." "If you go into that valley now, you'll join him." William's voice was hard. "I've seen 5 cycles, Samuel. Watched good people try to be heroes. They all became stone, all of them." "There has to be a way to break the curse," Tom said. "The original ritual was performed by a medicine man with knowledge we've lost. Standing Deer died that day in 1838. Whatever he did, whatever words he spoke, nobody alive knows them." William stood, clearly done with the conversation. "You're a marshal, Samuel. You serve the people. Best way to do that is to stay alive and warn others away. Let the dead keep their dead." We left without answers. I wanted, but we left with knowledge I couldn't ignore. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Robert Wilnody, about his wife waiting for him, about the 14 other people spread across 40 years who'd walked into that valley and never come back. And I thought about something William had said. The village is still there. If it was still there, it could be found. If it could be found, maybe something could be done. I wasn't a medicine man, didn't know Cherokee magic or rituals, but I was a cop. I knew how to investigate. I knew how to find things people wanted hidden. At 6 a.m., I called the FBI field office in Asheville. "This is Marshal Samuel Swimmer, Eastern Band Cherokee Police. I need to report a pattern of disappearances on federal land adjacent to reservation territory, possible serial kidnapping case spanning 40 years. The agent on the other end was skeptical until I laid out the numbers. 14 confirmed missing persons, all fitting the same pattern, all in the same location. That got his attention. "We'll send someone out," he said. "Give us 2 days." 2 days. We were already on day 4 of the 7-day window William mentioned. If I was going to find Robert Wilnody alive, I didn't have time to wait for federal bureaucracy. I grabbed my gear. Winter equipment, emergency supplies, rope, flares, and my service weapon, though I doubted it would help against whatever was up there. Left a note for Tom telling him to give the FBI everything I'd found if I didn't come back. And I drove up to Snowbird Mountains alone. The snow was heavier now, the road barely passable. I parked next to Robert's truck and followed our tracks from the day before, now half covered with fresh powder. When I reached the spot where his footprints ended, I stopped, looked around carefully. In daylight, I could see what I'd missed before. A faint trail leading off to the left, barely visible through the trees. Not a hiking trail, something older, something that probably wasn't on any modern map. I followed it. The forest changed as I walked. The trees grew larger, older. The snow seemed quieter here, muffling sound in a way that felt unnatural. And the temperature dropped, not gradually, but suddenly, like I'd walked through an invisible wall into a freezer. After 30 minutes, I saw it. The village. It sat in a small valley, surrounded by standing stones arranged in a circle. 50 or 60 structures. Traditional Cherokee dwellings from the 1830s. Log cabins with bark roofs. A central council house. Smoke rose from chimneys. Lanterns burned in windows. It looked lived in, maintained, alive. But it was absolutely silent. No voices, no movement. Just the smoke and the lights and the snow falling on buildings that shouldn't exist. I approached slowly, hand on my weapon. Called out, "Cherokee Marshal, anyone here?" The silence was absolute. I entered the village proper, walking between buildings, looked through windows and saw people, or things that had been people. They stood in the houses, frozen mid-activity. A woman at a cooking fire, ladle raised to a pot. A man seated at a table, hand reaching for a cup. Children playing on the floor, caught in the middle of a game. All of them gray. Stone, perfectly preserved but completely still. Their eyes were open, and as I moved past them, the eyes followed me. They were alive in there, aware, trapped. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Don't go up there after the first snow. Too late, grandmother. Too late." I was about to turn back when I saw him. Robert Wilnoti, standing in the center of the village circle, rifle at his feet, one hand raised as if waving for help. His skin was gray, the transformation not quite complete. His eyes locked onto mine, and I saw recognition there, saw pleading. And behind him, I saw something else. The standing stones weren't just arranged in a circle. They formed a doorway, and something was moving through them, something massive, something made of living rock that bent light around itself, Nunna'yi. The stone man had come home. The thing that emerged from between the standing stones wasn't like any creature I'd ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but it was massive, easily 12 feet tall. Its body seemed to be made of living stone, gray granite that shifted and flowed like muscle beneath skin. When it moved, I could hear the grinding of rock against rock, a sound that made my teeth ache. Its face, if you could call it that, was featureless except for 2 deep-set hollows where eyes should be. But I could feel it looking at me, studying me, judging whether I belonged here. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and sprint back through the forest. But Robert Wilnoti was right there, 20 feet away, still partially human, still aware. I'd come up here to find him. I couldn't leave him now. "I'm Cherokee Nation law enforcement," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here for Robert Wilnoti. I'm taking him home." The stone man, Nunna'yi, tilted its head, and then it spoke. The voice wasn't coming from its mouth. It came from everywhere at once, from the stones beneath my feet, from the air itself. And it wasn't one voice. It was dozens, maybe hundreds, all speaking in unison. Cherokee words, the old dialect my grandmother had spoken when I was young. Tsuna delaquasti, the protector stands eternal. These are under protection. These are safe. "They're prisoners," I said. "Look at them. They're trapped. Protected, safe from the soldiers, safe from the removal, safe from death." This was the bargain. I looked around at the frozen villagers, at the stone faces with their aware, pleading eyes. This isn't safety. This is torture. The stone man moved closer, each step making the ground tremble. "You are Cherokee. You understand duty." The medicine man called. I answered. The village is protected, always. The medicine man is dead. The soldiers are gone. The Trail of Tears was 151 years ago. The protection isn't needed anymore. Protection is eternal. Cannot be undone. Cannot be stopped. The call was made. The bargain was struck. "Then let me take this one," I said, gesturing to Robert. "He's not part of the original village. He's not part of the bargain." The stone man's head turned toward Robert. He entered the circle. He stands on protected ground. He is protected now. He is safe. He doesn't want to be safe. He wants to go home. All wish to go home. All cannot. The protection must continue. I realized then that Nunna'yi wasn't evil. It was just literal. It had been called to protect the village, so it protected the village. Forever. It didn't understand that its protection had become a prison, or maybe it did understand and simply didn't care. Duty was duty. I thought about William Sequoia's words. Standing Deer performed the ritual nobody alive knows the words he spoke. But maybe someone did know. Maybe someone who'd been there when the ritual was performed. Someone who'd been standing in this village for 151 years, fully aware, unable to speak, but still thinking, still remembering. "Show me the oldest villagers," I said. "The ones who were adults in 1838. Nunna'yi regarded me silently. Then, surprisingly, it moved aside, gesturing toward the central council house I walked past. The stone man carefully, every muscle tensed, expecting it to grab me at any moment. But it just watched as I climbed the steps and entered the council house. Inside were 7 figures, all turned to stone, all standing in a circle around a central fire pit that somehow still burned, despite being in a petrified building. They were older, these 7, faces lined with age, even in stone. And in the center, dressed in traditional medicine man regalia, was a figure I knew must be Standing Deer himself. His eyes, like all the others, were aware. But there was something different in them. Not pleading, not fear. Regret. Deep, profound regret. "You did this," I said to the stone medicine man. "You called Nunna'yi. You thought you were saving your people." The eyes blinked once, a confirmation. "You didn't know it would be permanent." Another blink. "Do you know how to undo it? How to end the protection?" The eyes moved, looking toward something in the corner of the room. I followed his gaze to find a bundle wrapped in deerskin, sitting on a stone shelf. It looked untouched by time. Preserved like everything else in this village, I picked up the bundle carefully. Inside was a medicine bundle, sacred tobacco, crystals, dried herbs, and underneath them a piece of bark with writing scratched into it Cherokee syllabary, the writing system Sequoia had created. This was old but not ancient, post-1821 at least. The words were faded, but I could make them out. To undo the protection, the protector must be released from duty. Only one of the people, speaking in council with the authority of the tribe, can release Nunna'yi from his sacred obligation. The ritual must be performed at the gate stones with offerings of tobacco and acknowledgement of service rendered. I looked at Standing Deer. "You figured it out, after it was too late." One slow blink. "Yes. And you've been standing here for 151 years, knowing the answer, unable to tell anyone." Another blink, I read the bark again. One of the people, speaking in council, with the authority of the tribe. I wasn't a tribal elder. I wasn't a medicine man, but I was a Cherokee Nation Marshal. I held authority granted by the tribe to enforce tribal law and custom. Did that count? Would Nunna'yi accept it? Only one way to find out. I took the medicine bundle and walked back outside. The stone man stood exactly where I'd left it, patient as the mountains. "I am Samuel Swimmer, Cherokee Nation Marshal, badge 447, serving the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians by authority of our tribal council." I spoke formally in Cherokee when I could remember the words, falling back to English when I couldn't. "I speak with the tribe's authority on matters of law and custom." Nunna'yi tilted its head, listening. "I acknowledge your service. For 151 years, you have protected this village as you were called to do. You have fulfilled your sacred obligation beyond any reasonable duty. The soldiers are gone. The removal is over. Our people have survived. Your protection succeeded." The stone man didn't move, but I felt something shift in the air. I release you from your obligation. The village no longer needs protection. The people are safe. Your service is ended with honor and gratitude." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Nunna'yi spoke again. But this time the voice was singular, not the chorus of many. The medicine man called me in desperation. I answered in duty, but duty without end becomes prison for both guardian and guarded. "I understand," I said. "And I'm sorry it took us 151 years to figure it out. You are Cherokee. You understand obligation. You understand the weight of protection." The stone man looked at the frozen villagers. "If I release them, they will die. Their bodies have been stone for more than a century. They cannot return to flesh." My heart sank. All of them? The old ones, yes. Those who were adult when protection began. The stone has become their substance, but the newer ones, it gestured to Robert Wilnoty. Those who have been protected for days or weeks instead of decades, they may survive. The stone has not fully claimed them. How many can be saved? Perhaps 7. The ones taken in the last 3 cycles, 1969 and later. 7 out of 53 people currently trapped in the village. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And if you release them all anyway, even knowing the older ones will die, they will die, but they will die free. Die human. After 151 years of stone prison, is that not mercy? I thought about Standing Deer, about the other villagers frozen in their daily tasks for a century and a half, about the 1949 hunters, the 1959 hikers, all of them trapped and aware. "Yes," I said, "it's mercy. Then I release them. I release all who stand in protection. My obligation is ended." Nunna'yi raised its massive stone arms. The air grew thick, charged, like before a lightning strike. The standing stones around the village began to glow with a faint blue light. And then, starting with the newest victims and working backward through time, the stone began to crack. Robert Wilnoty collapsed first, the gray fading from his skin, color returning to his face. He gasped, drawing in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. I ran to him, catching him before he hit the ground. "Easy," I said, "easy. You're okay, you're safe." "What? What happened?" His voice was hoarse. "I was hunting, and then stone. Everything went stone, but I could still think, still see. How long?" 4 days, I said. "You've been here 4 days." 4 others emerged from buildings. People I recognized from the files, the 1979 park ranger, 2 of the 1969 campers. Another, more recent victim I didn't have records for. All of them stumbling, confused, traumatized, but alive. Then the older victims began to emerge. The 1959 hikers, the 1949 hunters, the original 1838 villagers. They came out of their houses in their frozen poses. They took 2 or 3 steps, and then they simply dissolved. Not violently, peacefully. Their stone bodies crumbling to dust that was caught by the wind and carried away into the forest. I watched Standing Deer walk out of the council house. He looked at me, and for the first time in 151 years, he smiled. Then he too dissolved, becoming part of the mountain he'd tried so hard to protect. Within 10 minutes, the village was empty except for the 5 survivors, myself and Nunna'yi. The stone man was changing too. Its form was becoming less solid, more translucent. My obligation is fulfilled. I return to the stone, but know this, Samuel Swimmer. You have taken responsibility for ending the protection. That responsibility does not end with my release. What do you mean? The village is no longer protected, but the site remains sacred. And something must guard it, must ensure that what happened here is not forgotten. That task falls to you now. I'm just a marshal. I'm not a medicine man. You released me. You spoke with authority. You accepted the burden. Every 10 years you must return to this place during the first snow. You must walk the boundary. You must remember. If you fail, if you forget, the call will go out again, and something will answer. Perhaps something worse than me. That's not fair. I didn't ask for this. Standing Deer did not ask for his burden either, yet he carried it. Such is the way of duty. Nunna'yi was almost invisible now, more suggestion than substance. Guard this place, Samuel Swimmer. Remember what happened here. That is your obligation now. And then the stone man was gone, faded completely into the standing stones that formed the gate. The glowing stopped. The charged feeling in the air dissipated. We were alone in an empty village that was already beginning to look ancient. The buildings aging decades in seconds. Now that Nunna'yi's protection was gone, I gathered the survivors and led them back through the forest. They were in shock, unable to really process what had happened to them. The park ranger, whose name was David Crow, had been missing since 1979. He'd been in that village, aware but immobile, for 10 years. How is this possible? He kept asking. How did I survive? I should have starved. Should have died from exposure. You were protected, I said. Nunna'yi doesn't let what it protects die, even if that means trapping them in stone. We reached the trucks, Robert's and mine. I radioed for emergency services, for medical evacuation, for help. Then I called Tom. I found them, I said, 5 survivors. But Tom, it's complicated. We're going to need the FBI after all. And the tribal council. And probably a therapist because nobody's going to believe this. Are you okay? Tom asked. I looked back toward where the village was hidden. I could still feel it, like a weight on my chest. Every 10 years, Nunna'yi had said. Every 10 years I'd have to come back. No, I said honestly. But I'm alive. That's more than 50 people can say. The FBI arrived within hours. Special Agent Gregor Webb, a no-nonsense guy in his 40s who'd probably dealt with more weird cases than he'd ever admit, I gave him the official version. I'd tracked Robert Wilnetty's trail, found a hidden valley where missing persons had been sheltering, possibly held by someone, found 5 survivors, evidence of many others who'd died from exposure over the years. Webb wasn't stupid. He knew I was lying. But he also knew that sometimes the official story is all you can put in a report, Cherokee Marshal, he said, pulling me aside. Whatever really happened up there, I don't need to know. But I need to know this. Is it over? Is anyone else going to disappear from that area? I thought about Nunna'yi's final words, about my new obligation. Not for another 10 years at least. 10 years. Webb studied my face. That's specific, huh? That's specific. He nodded slowly. Then I'm going to recommend that the Snowbird area be designated a protected cultural site. No public access without tribal permits. That work for you? That works for me. The survivors were taken to hospitals. Physically, they were fine. No frostbite, no malnutrition, no injuries. But psychologically, they'd need years of therapy. How do you process being trapped in stone, aware but unable to move, for days or years or decades? David Crow, the 1979 park ranger, spent 3 weeks in psychiatric evaluation before they believed he wasn't having a complete breakdown. The doctors couldn't explain how he'd survived 10 years without food or water. They wrote it up as a dissociative fugue state and left it at that. Robert Wilnoty went home to his wife and tried to go back to normal life. But he told me, a year later, that he still had nightmares. Still dreamed he was stone, unable to move, screaming silently as the world went on without him. As for me, I went back to regular marshal duties. Domestic disputes, drunk and disorderlies. The normal rhythm of law enforcement on the reservation. But every December, when the first heavy snow fell, I felt it, the pull, the obligation, and I knew what was coming. December 1999. 10 years since I'd released Nunna'yi from his obligation. 10 years since I'd taken on a burden I didn't fully understand. I was 52 now, grayer, slower, but still wearing the badge. Still serving as Cherokee Nation Marshal. Tom Sequoia had moved up, become my supervisor, which meant I had to deal with his paperwork obsession instead of just my own. We'd both gained weight. His wife was an excellent cook, and my bachelor diet consisted mainly of fried food and regret. The first heavy snow came on December 4th. I felt it the moment I woke up. Not the snow itself, but the pull, like a string attached to my chest, tugging gently but insistently toward the Snowbird Mountains, toward Old Mission Creek Valley, toward the village that no longer existed but somehow still called to me. "You're going up there," Tom said when I came into the office. It wasn't a question. "Have to. Want company?" I shook my head. Nunna'yi made this my responsibility, mine alone. "Samuel, you're not a young man anymore, and that place—" He trailed off. We'd never talked about what really happened in 1989. The official report said one thing, but Tom knew there was more. Even if I'd never told him the full story, I'll be fine. Just need to walk the boundary. Make sure everything's quiet. And if it's not quiet? Good question. What would I do if the protection had failed? If something else had answered the call? If new victims had been taken? "Then I call you," I said. "And we handle it." I drove up to Snowbird alone, following the same roads I'd driven 10 years ago. The forest looked the same. Ancient trees, heavy snow, that particular silence that comes when you're deep in the mountains. But something felt different, heavier. Like the land itself was waiting for something. I parked at the old trailhead and walked in. My knees complained about the cold. My back reminded me that 52 was too old for wilderness hiking. But I pushed on. The path was still there, still faint, still leading to the hidden valley. When I reached the place where Robert Wilnoty's footprints had ended in 1989, I stopped, made an offering of tobacco, the way William Sequoia had taught me. Spoke in Cherokee, asking permission to continue. The forest remained silent, but the pull in my chest lessened slightly. Permission granted, or at least not denied. I continued to the village site. What had been buildings in 1989 were now just stones and rotted logs, fallen in on themselves. The standing stones still stood, but they were just stones now, no longer glowing, no longer a gate to anything. The whole place had the feeling of an archaeological site, something ancient and long abandoned, but it wasn't completely empty. In the center of what had been the village circle, someone had left offerings, fresh ones, tobacco tied in cloth bundles, crystals, sage, and a note written on birch bark in Cherokee syllabary. I picked it up carefully. The handwriting was shaky but clear. To the marshal who freed us, we remember. We honor the burden you carry. We light tobacco for you every December. You are not forgotten. David Crow. David Crow. The park ranger from 1979, who'd been stone for 10 years, he'd been here, had made offerings, had remembered. I felt something tight in my chest loosen. I wasn't alone in this. The survivors remembered. They understood. I walked the boundary of the site, all the way around the standing stones, marking the perimeter in my mind. Everything was quiet. No new victims. No disturbances. The protection was holding, not because Nunna'yi was here, but because I was. As I finished the circuit, I heard a voice, not from the stones this time, not from everywhere at once. Just a voice on the wind, speaking Cherokee. The guardian walks. The circle is maintained. The obligation is honored. I didn't see anyone, didn't feel any presence beyond the normal awareness of being in a sacred place. But I knew I'd been acknowledged. Whatever cosmic force kept track of these things, it had noted that I'd shown up, that I'd done my duty. I made my own offering, tobacco and a prayer for standing deer, and all the others who'd been trapped here. Then I walked back to my truck. 10 years down, however many more to come. December 2009. I was 62, officially retired from active duty, but still on the books as a consultant for the Tribal Marshal Service. Tom was Chief Marshal now, running the department with the same careful attention to detail he'd shown as a young officer. The first heavy snow came on December 6th. I felt the pull, same as always. This time, Tom insisted on coming with me. "You're not as young as you used to be," he said. "And I'm the boss now, which means I can assign myself to accompany old, stubborn retired marshals on their weird annual pilgrimages." It's not a pilgrimage. Then what is it? I'd never told him the full story. Never explained about Nunna'yi, about the stone villagers, about the burden I carried. Some things are too strange to share, even with your closest colleague. But maybe it was time. On the drive up, I told him everything. The Stone Man, the time-frozen village, the ritual, the obligation that had been passed to me. He listened without interrupting, which was unlike Tom. Usually, he had opinions about everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long minute. Then, "You've been carrying that alone for 20 years? It's my responsibility. Samuel, you're Cherokee. You know better than that. We're collective people. We carry burdens together." He looked at the snow-covered road ahead. "I'm coming with you every year from now on. That's not negotiable." I started to argue, then stopped. Truth was, I was getting older. The walk was getting harder, and the loneliness of the obligation had been weighing on me more each year. "Okay," I said. "But if something grabs you and turns you to stone, I'm telling your wife it was your idea to come." He laughed. "Deal." We reached the village site together. More offerings had been left over the years. I could see them around the standing stones. David Crow's annual tobacco bundles. Other items from other survivors or their families. People who knew, who remembered, who honored what had happened here. Tom walked the boundary with me. Didn't ask questions about the ritual or the specifics. Just walked, present, and supportive. When we finished, he made his own offering. "For standing deer," he said, "and for my grandfather who tried to warn us. And for you, for carrying this." I didn't trust myself to speak, just nodded. We walked back together. The pull was quieter that year. Maybe because I wasn't alone. Maybe because the burden felt lighter when shared. December 2019. I was 72. Tom was 68. We were both too old for this, but we came anyway. The snow was heavy that year, the roads nearly impassable. We took Tom's grandson with us, James, 24, sharp as his grandfather, newly hired as a marshal. He needed to know, needed to understand what he might be dealing with in these mountains. I told him the story as we drove. He listened with the same patient attention Tom had shown at his age. When I finished, he said, "So you're saying there's a cursed village in these mountains that turns people to stone, and you have to walk around it every 10 years to keep it from happening again?" That's the simplified version, but yes. And nobody officially knows about this? The FBI knows something happened. The tribal council knows there are cultural restrictions on the area, but the full truth. Just me, Tom, the survivors, and now you. Why tell me? Tom answered that. Because someday, Samuel and I won't be able to make this walk, and someone has to. Someone has to remember. Someone has to maintain the boundary. James was quiet, processing. Then, "Okay, I'm in." Just like that. No argument, no skepticism. Just acceptance that this was part of the job, part of being Cherokee, part of serving the people. We walked the boundary together. 3 generations of Cherokee law enforcement. The site was more overgrown now, harder to find unless you knew exactly where to look. The standing stones were weathered but still standing. The offerings were still there, though David Crow's had stopped. I'd learned he'd passed away in 2015, but his children continued the tradition. As we walked, I felt something shift. Not the pull, not the obligation, something else. A sense of completion. Like I'd done what I was supposed to do, like the burden was being properly passed on. "The thing is," I said to James as we finished the circuit, "this isn't just about preventing disappearances. It's about remembering, about honoring what happened here. The trail of tears, the desperate attempt to escape it, the price paid for protection. If we forget, if we let this place become just another piece of forest, then everyone who suffered here, the villagers, the victims, even Nunna'yi, they all suffered for nothing." "I understand," James said. "And I'll remember. I'll make sure others remember too." December 2024. I'm 77 now. Tom passed away last year. Heart attack, peaceful in his sleep, the way he would have wanted. His grandson. James is Chief Marshal now, running the department with the same dedication Tom showed. I made the walk alone this year, slower than ever before, needing frequent breaks, feeling every one of my 77 years. But I made it. The village site is barely visible now. Nature has reclaimed most of it. In another decade, you wouldn't know anything had ever been here unless you knew exactly what to look for. The standing stones remain. They'll remain for centuries, probably. Stone doesn't forget. I made my offerings, walked the boundary, spoke the words I've spoken every 10 years for 35 years, and as I finished, I felt it. The obligation releasing. Not completely. It would never completely release while I lived. But loosening. Passing on James is ready. He understands. He'll take over when I can't do this anymore. And someday, he'll pass it to someone else. And they'll pass it to someone after them. An unbroken chain of remembrance stretching forward through time, just as Nunna'yi's protection stretched for 151 years. Here's what I want people to understand. The government talks about Indian removal like it was a historical event, something that happened and ended. But the Trail of Tears never really ended. Its effects echo forward through generations. The trauma, the loss, the desperate measures people took to survive, all of it is still here, still affecting us, still demanding to be remembered. Standing Deer made a choice in 1838, a terrible choice, born of desperation. He called on Nunna'yi to protect his village, not understanding the cost, and for 151 years that village paid the price. But here's the thing. Standing Deer wasn't wrong to try to protect his people. He was wrong in how he did it, in not understanding what he was calling on. But the impulse to protect, to preserve, to prevent his people from being torn from their homeland. That impulse was right. It was human. It was Cherokee. We all carry burdens we didn't choose, obligations we didn't ask for, responsibilities that were handed to us by history, by circumstance, by the desperate choices of those who came before us. Standing Deer carried the burden of protecting his village. I carry the burden of remembering what happened when that protection went wrong. James will carry it after me, and someone after him. That's what it means to be Cherokee, to carry the weight of history, to remember when others forget, to maintain the boundaries, literally and figuratively, that keep us safe and whole. The FBI finally declassified the 1989 case files last year. They're heavily redacted. Most of the supernatural elements are blacked out, but the basic facts are there. 14 missing persons over 40 years, all in the same location. 5 survivors recovered. Multiple casualties confirmed, but bodies never found. Agent Gregor Webb, who's retired now, called me when the files went public. "I've spent 30 years wondering what really happened up there," he said. The official story never made sense, but I've learned that sometimes the truth is too strange for official reports. "Sometimes it is," I agreed. "Those survivors, the ones you found, they all tell similar stories about being trapped, unable to move, aware but helpless, about something protecting them and imprisoning them at the same time. That's not a hallucination. That's not trauma. That's too consistent, too specific." "What are you asking, Agent Webb?" "I'm asking if you'll tell me the truth off the record, just so I know, just so I can stop wondering." I thought about it, about secrecy and truth, about who deserves to know and who doesn't, about the weight of carrying impossible knowledge alone. The truth is that the Cherokee people paid a terrible price for surviving the Trail of Tears, I said. And sometimes the consequences of survival take generations to resolve. The truth is that there are places in these mountains where the old world still exists, where the past isn't past, where protection and imprisonment are the same thing. The truth is that I've spent 35 years making sure it doesn't happen again. That's all the truth you need. Webb was quiet for a long moment, then, "Thank you, Marshal Swimmer. That's enough. I'm writing this now because I'm 77 years old, and I need to make sure the story survives me. James knows the obligations, knows the ritual, knows the boundaries. But he doesn't know everything, doesn't know how it felt to stand before Nunna'yi, doesn't know the weight of releasing a curse that had held for 151 years, doesn't know the faces of the stone villagers as they crumbled to dust, finally free after more than a century. So I'm writing it down. All of it. The truth that's too strange for official reports, but too important to forget. If you're reading this, you probably think it's fiction, a story, a legend. And maybe that's okay. Maybe legends serve a purpose. Maybe the line between truth and story is less important than the meaning behind them. But know this, there are places in the Snowbird Mountains of North Carolina where you don't go after the first heavy snow. There are standing stones in a hidden valley that mark something ancient and powerful. There are obligations that pass from generation to generation, burdens carried willingly because someone has to carry them. And every December, when the snow falls heavy, a Cherokee Marshal makes a walk through the forest, marks a boundary, makes offerings, remembers. Because some protections never end. They just change form, transfer from stone guardians to human ones, from Nunna'yi to Samuel Swimmer to James Sequoia to whoever comes next. The cycle continues. The obligation persists. The boundary holds. And the village in the valley, the one that officially doesn't exist, remains quiet and empty and remembered. That's all any of us can do. Remember, honor, maintain. That's the Guardian's burden, and it's mine until the day I die.